Recently asked if I could help show people how to make some LUTs and apply them inside of Lightroom. So I'm going to make a video that shows you how you can take greens and turn them into oranges, and then using the amount slider, like ramp it up or down and get exactly the look that you're looking for. For the most part, this video is going to be more about the mechanics and less about the quality of this LUT that I created. Your mileage may vary. LUTs are definitely a very subjective thing. You can do a lot of really cool things with them, but you can also go overboard and you can make some really unnatural looking things. So take that with a grain of salt, and let's just figure out, or let me show you how that works. So first, I'm going to cancel all this stuff out because I don't really want to apply it. I'm going to be inside of Photoshop to open up a file first that I want to use as a starting point for the creation of this LUT. I just need to open a file, have it open inside of Photoshop, and then I'm going to go into 3D LUT Creator. Let me reset this out. I was just playing with this before. And I'm going to open the image from Photoshop. And what you'll see is a little spinning beach ball, and then boom, that image is open inside of 3D LUT Creator. 3D LUT Creator is an app that you can get online. I prefer it because it allows you to create LUTs in Adobe RGB space. Unfortunately, Photoshop's only spaces that it can make LUTs in is sRGB. So if you're generally working with files with larger color spaces, or if you want to output to Adobe RGB or larger, the Photoshop created LUTs usually aren't the greatest. Photoshop created LUTs are great for video for the most part, but I just found that for photography, I prefer to use 3D LUT Creator. 3D Light Creator also has some really cool tools that you can use to make the images look really, really interesting. I've used this tool for making a lot of the profiles that you can use inside of Lightroom. So if you've already used some of those profiles, you've already seen what 3D Light Creator can do. So the basics. Now, 3D LUT Creator has a lot of things going on inside of it. You can see over in the top left, all these areas of different tools that you can turn on. It has channels and volume, AB, CL, curves, 2D curves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For the most part, for right now, we're just going to be staying in the AB color editor. And so I've got the little spider web over here. I prefer the spider web to the grid for the most part. We'll talk about that in a second, but I'm going to leave it on the spider web. The first thing I would recommend that you do, especially when you're going to be doing something where you're going to be creating very, very precise LUTs, is increasing the resolution of the spider web. So if you can see, like with just 4, you only have 4 quadrants, and we go in here and you can ramp it up. I find that 16 is pretty useful. Sometimes you can do it with 8, but it depends again on what you're trying to accomplish. At the bottom, you have some generic global adjustments that you're going to just apply globally to your LUT. And so you can see, like, we can do temperature, tint, brightness, contrast. I'm not going to do any of those things because I'm actually going to use the tools inside of Lightroom to accomplish the goals. But right now, what I'm going to be using 3D LUT Creator and the LUT that I want to create specifically for is to change green tones into oranges, because that was like the request that I got from a user on Reddit. So let's take a look at how we would do that. So you can see now we've got this little spider web. The center of the spider web is actually I should say the saturation goes radially. So in the middle, it's the lowest saturation. As you go out to the right, the less saturation. You can even see that on this little ramp over here. As I move my slider out, you can see that the saturation goes up, oops, and down. So what I can see here is these are all the colors. Nothing's been applied to it just yet. So you can see like greens are green and yellows are yellow and reds are red. If I want to change any of those things, I'd actually grab some of these elements and move them around. A couple of real quick things about 3D LUT Creator. When you start off with the larger squares mean that they're pinned. The smaller ones are not pinned. That means if I grab something that's pinned, it'll actually grab the whole range of things, but not any of the other ones on the other kind of like, what do you call these, radials? I forget all the terminology these days. Anyway, so what we're going to do now is we can start thinking about how we're going to move these elements. If you roll over the image, you'll actually see the little white X, which is showing you where the pixel under your mouse cursor exists. So you can see that there's obviously a whole lot of greens. You can see also a little scatter plot beneath the spider web showing you where you have a lot of colors in here. And of course, a lot of colors here. That's where like all this cyan is, and then the greens. And so what I want to do now is I want to start moving some of these elements over. Now, if I just grab it you can see like I've just changed all of that one specific shade of green and that's kind of surrounding vicinities into this really bright red, but it's created this really unnatural looking effect because I've just grabbed only this one section and moved it over. If at any point you want to reset things, just right click and it'll set it back to the original value. So what I found that can be really helpful here is you grab these guys and you can just take a look at what it's going to do to your image. Same thing with this one over here. Okay, so that's getting the edges of the leaves. So this is really like where the majority of the colors are. And just again, to show you what that looks like in terms of like saturation, if I bring it out, it's going to increase the saturation. If I bring it into the center, it's going to desaturate it. If you go all the other way, it's going to the complementary color, so it became magenta. So what you can do now is you can start to like move these things together, and you can make a little bounding box. Also, you can hold the shift key in bounding box, but you can't like just shift click on things, which is kind of weird, but oh well. So what you can see now is as I'm grabbing these elements together, I can start moving them, more of these towards like that orangey area. What's good about doing it this way is you can make sure that you're not like just taking only one smaller range of colors and then moving them super drastically over to towards like another color. So I'm getting, oops, I'm gonna click on that guy again and then shift click and shift click and shift click and shift drag. And there we go, move it over here. And I really recommend that you take an image and open an image kind of that's going to be representative of what you want to accomplish. So here I wanted to make sure that I had some of these like just different shades of greens. There's a different kind of green here, and then the edges, making sure that I'm not kind of overdoing it too much. I am overdoing it a bit right now, obviously, just for the sake of being able to see what I'm doing. If you want, you can also hit this smooth button, which is nice because it'll actually kind of help you smooth everything out, avoid, it's like the smoothing button inside of like the Photoshop curves. If you ever use the pencil on the curve, you can smooth things out, just reduces the kind of drasticness of the shift from one to the next color. So as we see this, now I can maybe move it over just a little bit more. And if you want, you can drag it out. It's going to increase the saturation. And so now I've got a pretty well saturated effect. If I hit the backslash key, just like in Lightroom, you can see the before and after. And that gives me an idea of like, okay, I'm going to look around. There's a green background that's also being affected, and that's fine. And the blues aren't really being affected, which is good. The kind of darker greens at the background are being affected and nice and orangey, but there's still a little bit of a green in here, and I can see that's because this guy isn't being moved. So if I drag him over, and maybe also this one a little bit, just to get that, make sure that we're not getting too, smooth it out a little bit. Okay. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. It's also a little bit oversaturated right over here. So where is this? That's over here. Okay, so you can even see, like it'll even like put a little black square. I can't really point to it with my mouse cursor because you don't see it, but if you look over there as I'm moving, it even's pointing to which of those little elements you would actually need to click and drag on. It was this one right here, if I wanted to move that one so it doesn't get too saturated. And you can see as I'm dragging that down, I can actually even just right click on that one and then take just the kind of like the parent and bring it down just a little bit so it's not oversaturating that one specific color. Okay, great. So it looks pretty good before and after. I'm going to go back into Photoshop, and I've got a couple of other images open here. I have this one right here, which is completely different, doesn't really have that many greens in it, but it has some of those colors of the sky, just to get an idea of what's going to happen. So if I go back into 3D LUT Creator and I click on the image from Photoshop again, it's going to pull that Photoshop image, the one that's in the foreground, back into 3D LUT Creator, and it's going to show me what that LUT that I've just created is going to do. And so you can see now that if you had a sunset, it's taking those kind of sunset yellows and it's going to make them really, really pink, which may or may not be what you want to do. So you can use this as a way of just kind of slowly kind of back and forth going between different images to make sure that the LUT that you're creating is going to accomplish the right kind of look for you. I'm not going to be too concerned about this because again, like the request was, how do I make my green leaves orange? You can get really, really fall down the rabbit hole pretty darn deep with LUTs. So recommend that you do this, play around with it, have a lot of fun, try it on a lot of different images. But for right now, I think this is fine, what we've created so far. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit the Save 3D LUT, and I've made a folder called LUTs. You can see I've already made one before just to give you guys an idea. And you can see I accidentally even saved one as a 3DL. You don't want that. You want a dot cube. So save this as a dot cube. Call it something unique like this is the video LUT. There we go. I'll remember it. Okay. And save. One thing you want to do before you go back over to create the profile for Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, take a look at the top what space your image was in that you're working on when you created that LUT. This says that it's an Adobe RGB LUT. That's important to keep in mind because that's going to be something you're going to need to enter into the profile creation tool that I'm going to show you right now. So let's open up Photoshop. Actually, sorry, let's open up Bridge. Let's open up these images, open in Camera Raw. Even though this profile that I'm creating is going to be designed specifically that I want to use it inside of Lightroom, the profiles we create work exactly the same whether in Lightroom or inside of Camera Raw. But today, or at least as of right now, the only way you can create a profile is inside of Camera Raw. So let's go into Camera Raw, which is where I am right now. And I'm going to click on this Presets tab. And down here is the new preset button, but hold the Option key or Alt on a PC and click. And now you can see that it says New Profile. And that's how we're going to create this profile. Now, if you didn't hold that Option key, it would create a new preset. It was a completely different interface right here. But for right now, I'm going to go through and create a new profile. And the first thing we want to do is we want to start naming it. So we can call this one like, what is it? Orange is the new green. Yay. And then we can put it into a group. And this is going to be helpful for you to figure out like how do you organize this stuff. So I'm going to hit new group and I'm going to call this one profiles for the Reddit massive. And click OK. And now this is where we're going to go. I'm going to start off with, I'm going to uncheck the point curve. Now, kind of like a preset, profiles can actually include a lot of these elements, but unlike a preset, when these elements that are included inside of a profile, you can't modify. You can't even see them. They're kind of like baked in, and it becomes more like a filter if you think about it like filters in Instagram or other tools like that. Going down the line, I'm just going to turn off not everything because the only thing I really want to have inside of here is the color lookup table. Now, it's kind of confusing. You have look table and color lookup table. The look table is basically the Adobe Raw rendering. And so just leave that as is. That's totally fine. You don't have to change anything inside of there. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click the box that says color lookup table. And I can say like, oh, this is the video LUT. That's what I just created. Great. Now, this is where I was telling you before. Make sure you're changing the space appropriately to Adobe RGB. Now, here's where you can have some fun with this. Right now, there's going to be a slider, and that slider is going to allow you to adjust from any of these values. And what you can see is, by default, it means that when your slider is at 0, the result of the LUT will be 0. When the slider is at 100, the result of the LUT will be 100%. And when the slider is at 200, the result of that LUT will be 200%. That's the default. You can imagine or ask the question like, well, how do you go from 100 to 200? Well, we interpolate. So you can basically say that if a thing will be making it more orange, or green, sorry, not a thing, but if you make a green more orange at 100%, well, what would you do at 200%? Well, you doubled that kind of delta. And so we're interpolating what that's going to be. Now, if you don't want to interpolate, you can literally say, nope, the maximum is 100 and the kind of default starting position is 50. The sliders will still say 0, 100, 200. This can get a little confusing. Don't worry about it too much. But for the most part, I just leave it at 0, 100, and 200. But if you ever want to say, no, I never want to go above the effect that I've created, like the thing that I created inside a 3D LUT Creator is the absolute max, and I never want to go beyond that, that's when you would set this max to 100%. You can leave the amount 100% and the max 100%, which means that the slider doesn't change anything from 100 to 200. It's exactly the same. But you can also change it so it doesn't have to be linear. You could even do like 90 and 100%. And so that means like from 0 to 100, it goes to from 0 to 90. And then from 100 to 200, it goes from 90 to 100, if that makes sense, hopefully. But we're just going to go back and set it up as accordingly. All right, great. So now I'm going to click OK. Gonna go click back over on my Basics tab, click on the Browse Profiles, click down here, Profiles for the Reddit Massive. Orange is the new green. We can click on one of these guys. Boom! Look at how, yep, I kind of overdid it. That looks a little bit nicer on this image. And again, you can see like even some of those yellows in the brick are being affected. If I take this amount slider and I bring it up, you can see that I've kind of created this almost infrared effect. But you can also like tune it in, tune it down, however you want to do it. We go select a different image. This is that same image that I started off with. And you can see what happens if I go to 200%. Whoa, too much. So you can see, again, the reason why it's pretty good to play around with this a lot and adjust it. A couple of the real quick things that you can do. If you right click on this one and holding again down the option key and then clicking rename, you've got a broader view of the profile. There's a couple things you can do in here. You can rename it, you can put it into a different group, you can add it to a cluster. Clusters are a pretty interesting way of being able to adjust like the organization. If you can see these little lines here, these are clusters. So for example, if I wanted to make this so that only I can, or sorry, if I want to make this different, put it in a different position, I can add it to a cluster. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. I can also put in here a short name and a sort name. The sort name is useful if you go in here and you say like, oh, I want to call this orange is the new green, but I really want this to be the first one in a list. And so if I put 0, 1 in there, that means that it's going to sort by the sort name instead of the name. Without this, it's just going to sort alphabetically according to the name, but you can use the sort name to override that without having to put 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, like we've seen some people create their profiles and presets. So we added that in there to make it easier. The cluster, we can just call this Josh, because that's my name. Description, copyright, contact, whatever, no big deal. I don't really care about that stuff. That applicability, this is where you can say, oh, okay, this is actually available for all images and all formats, not just images that are with the Adobe Standard Profile. Now, that would mean Adobe Standard Profile is only available for RAW files. So if you want to make sure that it works for everything, make sure it says all images. You can say limit to raw images or raw and non-raw images. So now you can apply this to JPEGs. You can apply it to color images. It wouldn't make much sense to do this thing to monochrome images, so that's fine. Same with normal and high dynamic range images. You can also say like, don't apply it to high dynamic range images. I don't really know how you do that. And then finally, the support amount slider. This gives you an option to be able to like turn off that slider that we had in there. So one word of warning about clusters. Once you add a cluster to it, you can't actually modify it inside of Adobe Camera Raw. You can then have to edit it in a text editor, and I can show you what that looks like in a moment, how to remove that and then get back into being able to edit it this way. But yeah, it's just, we're not gonna go there. If I click OK, what you can see here is, now this is no longer under user profiles. It now has its own cluster. If any other kind of categories would now be clustered together. So that's, the clusters are a way of organizing categories together into one area or another. The whole Josh cluster won't show up anywhere. That's just for my internal reading. So you can see information about the profile that you just created. You can manage your profiles, see where they're showing up, wherever, and all that kind of good stuff. So now let me remind myself about where those profiles are located. I'm pretty sure they're under library and then application setting. Yeah, and I think it's under Adobe and then Camera Raw and then settings. Alrighty. There's the profile that I created. Orange is the new green. So if I wanted to load that into Lightroom, I could just drop this onto my desktop and then go into Lightroom and then go, go right, get import profiles and presets, and then go back to my desktop. Orange is the new green, hit import, take this image right here, click on the profiles, scroll down to where profiles for the Reddit Massive, and boom. And look at that. I should have definitely included an image with some skin tones in there because those skin tones look terrible. Sorry about that. But yeah, the idea, you get it. You can apply it to a bunches of different kinds of images pretty easily. And that's it, really. That's how you make a profile that will change your greens into oranges and then some if you really go over the top.